the real agenda of educating black children.
The next area of expertise that we had to develop was the idea that we had to train teachers. Just because you were black, like I said, just because you got skin folk don't make you kinfolk, or whatever that saying goes. So that holds true for African-centered teaching. Heretofore, there were not any colleges of education who developed students or teachers to teach an African-centered curriculum. So we were lucky enough to have the whole African-centered scholars, grassroots, ASCAC, Leonard Jeffries, Asa Hilliard, Akima Abute, his lovely wife, can't remember her name right now, Shafisha. We had Imani Humphreys. We had a lot of strong community people who started to train us in what we call normative training. And so when we first started, I thought it was really kind of funny because it was black males. That was another aspect that we would rally behind. We wanted more black males because, as you know, black men in the educational system was kind of like 0.05 of the academics, of the teaching.
Because it's that important. Less than half of 1% of teachers in our state are black men. But there's a new group we've introduced you to that is still trying to change that, and they want to do it over the next decade. And nearly 150 people got together today to celebrate the kickoff of the Collective Impact Coalition. Here's Kaya Edwards.
This year, Black Men Teach turned 6, and this large gathering at Crestview Elementary in Minneapolis marks the start of the next 10.
It's a small nonprofit that's all about supporting more black male elementary school teachers leading classrooms here in Minnesota.
Executive Director Marcus Flynn says by the 2034-2035 school year, the goal is to recruit 450 black men. And doing the recruiting will be a coalition of stakeholders, not just black men.
The coalition has a similar goal, but the difference is we're bringing in a lot of people.
Flynn says so far around 25 organizations have committed to recruit, including Minneapolis and St. Paul Public Schools, the University of Minnesota, Metro State, St. Thomas, and more.
The lack of black male educators is such a large, persistent challenge that it's going to take a large community united effort in order to solve. There's just under 60,000 teachers across the state of Minnesota. About 220 of those are black men. So you're talking about less than half of 1%. And at the elementary level, there's even more of a dearth. There's less than 50 black male elementary school teachers teaching in the entire state of Minnesota. And so we need more.
So we had to recruit a lot of males. And so I remember that period we went through in that recruiting and developing that teaching process, what we call normative training, professional development training. There were a lot of brothers who initially didn't really quite feel it because we were basically flying the plane while we were building it. Okay, the curriculum was still being developed. The Portland-based essays was a grounding way we were pulling information from, developing our own textbooks, our own just the whole genre of teaching, and that means cross subjects: social studies, math, science, economics, history, especially historical. Okay, so all this had to be done, and I know a lot of teachers. I thought it was kind of funny too, because a lot of teachers were saying, "Oh, well, you know, where's the teacher's manual? You know, that's the Bible of any classroom. These old school teachers, if you know what I'm saying, you know, that teacher manual with everything." But we didn't have it. Just because they gave us the right to teach African-centered education, that don't mean they were going to actually give us the African-centered education to teach. So, you know, I was like, you know, okay, they said you can have the picnic, but that don't mean they're going to provide the food. Mm-hmm. So that really kind of, you know, another little caveat we had to develop. But after we got running, after we got the system behind us, the African-centered system at the Detroit Public Schools, HR, Social Studies Department, a wonderful lady named Dahir Sabayo. Never could, I mean, these are the thankless, you know, heroes and sheroes that nobody ever can get to hear. But that sister and her crew, Peggy Thomas, and her whole crew, turned the DPS on its head in 1990 and the subsequent years, because then professional development went from just a few speakers coming in to a whole national weekly thing, what we call the African Child in Crisis Conferences. And not only were they just for DPS and Detroit Public Schools, but they came from everywhere. Because at this time, the movement to teach African-centered education was it was swelling all over the country. And I know that because as a sociologist from Wayne State University, graduate of Wayne State University, Dr. Watson put me over in charge of all research into the effectiveness or the impact of African-centered studies, African-centered curriculum on our children. And so I had to give the okay for any research project, any, PhD investigation. I had to read over their whole hypothesis and see, their track, see what they were actually going to use the information for a positive, as opposed to, using the information as a negative. So that was my job. So I was getting calls from anywhere, all across, even into Africa. We got inquiries on what we were doing and how effective it is. So that being said, that was a whole trial. But we established ourselves as the cream of the creme when it came to public school education. Because let me go back and connect the dots between independent African-centered institutions. The one thing about the public school efforts is we had the money. We had the buildings. We had the access to certified teachers. Okay, so now we got the creme of the teachers. We got the economics behind us. In fact, we were so good that during these child development crisis conferences that we had, Shabaka and the rest of her crew of social studies, they demanded that the publishers, get this, that if you wanted a contract from Detroit Public Schools for your textbooks, you had to give us textbooks that reflected our agenda.
Yes.
And, business is business. They can talk about racism all they want to, but business, when you're talking about business, business is business. So eventually they healed over, and along with Malifa Shante, Asa Hilliard, and all the giants at the time, Linda Jeffries, we got together and we started demanding and describing the kind of textbooks we needed. And the only textbooks we were willing to buy. Oh, you talking about them, scrambling to develop the curriculum that now you talking about teacher manuals? Okay, we now got teacher manuals, y'all. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It took, from 1990 to 1994, but it got done. And you talking about accelerated progress. Our children, they love to come to school. That was the whole thing. I mean, school wasn't a punishment. School they looked forward to. Hell, they didn't want to even go home. And not only that, it wasn't just the children. It was the parents themselves. Because you must understand, prior to 1990, very little African-centered education was being implemented anywhere in the country. And so there was a line between Brown versus Board in 1954 to 1990. These parents were not educated in any cultural relevance. The parents didn't know. Don't send our child home with that black stuff. The parents called it the black stuff. But in our wisdom, we made children who came, because it was application school. That was another thing. You made an application. Anybody can just walk up there. You had to really want it. So in the application process, there was a parental covenant that parents had to sign to come up to the school and volunteer time, whether it's in the lunchroom, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's just monitoring the hallways, whether it's sitting with students who are having a little illness until their parents can pick them up. Whatever skill you had, you were welcome. We also had all our programs. Every program, no matter how simple, even the morning affirmations that we did every morning, started off with an African-centered theme. We sung the Black National Anthem. Every day,
Right here in the city of Detroit. Paul Robeson Malcolm X Academy is a pre-K through 8 school. Part of the curriculum teaches the contributions African people made in the United States and other parts of the world. Every morning, students start the day with the Black National Anthem and calm classroom exercises that include relaxation by stretching and breathing before getting into their studies. Students are also asked to encourage the practice of 2 of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa daily, Harambee, which means unity, and Ujima, which means collective work and responsibility.
Okay, now I say every day, I mean every day. And at all report libations at any assembly, we ask the ancestors to come and witness what their hard work and struggle that they laid down their lives to accomplish, to let them come, call their name and come and watch what your sacrifice has wrought, watch the fruit. So we went totally hard. We had debate team. Now I'm a part of the emotional debate thing that's going on here in Detroit right now, currently. But one thing I lack, that they lack, is that they don't have the African-centered debate. They didn't have the African-centered debate teams, where the whole issue, although they're getting around to some of these questions, had to do with the whole pedagogy of African thought. Okay, for example, they took the Nguzo Saba. Everybody talks about the Nguzo Saba. That's one of the core things with the teacher, especially during the Kwanzaa time. We talk about the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, but no one went so far as to say what those 7 principles impacted. And I thought I brought up. I hope I did. Or maybe I didn't. Or maybe left it. But I wanted you all to. I don't know if you can see this, but this is an African-centered, we call it the Sweet Bee chart. It has the African-centered Kwanzaa principles, and then that's external. But internal, what does the Nguzo Saba, what does the Kujichagulia look like on the inside? So you're not just shouting a bunch of Kiswahili symbols and terms, you're reflecting inside. Culture must dictate behavior. So here's the behavior guide. So we kind of made sure that we had both these things in place so that we can regulate all the Nguzo Saba principles that we hold dear, that we're trying to implement to our children. How do our children let us know that they're doing it? I'll read you one quick because I know you probably can't see it. Collective work, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. Externally, to be responsible for self and others. Internal behavior, teamwork, dependability, problem solving, conflict resolution, collectivism. These are the things that went into the teaching. So when you talk about African-centered education, it was more than just ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. It was a reflection of your culture, the morals, the code of Mayat, principles, balance, harmony, reciprocity. All these values and principles, not just the wordings, but the values. So all this was part of the real education of a people, because remember, if you invited a Jew to a barbecue, there's a good chance he won't come. Okay, there's a good chance, because that's not his values. Okay, he don't be eating that swine like that. But if you invite him to a bar mitzvah, or you invite him to where it's a vegan, then they might show up. But again, depending on their values. We have the same thing with any cultural population. If it's not in our value systems, we don't grab it. So what do you do with the people who have no value system? That's how vulnerable African Americans are. There's no code of conduct. There's no way. So when we're talking about teaching African-centered education, we're talking about nurturing children, nurturing our babies to go back and capture their ability to look at another black man and say something great, something positive to him. To look at a black woman and don't see it as something that you're going, like a sport, like somebody once described it as sports, sexual sporting. We have to look at our sisters as more than just the B words and the H words that they're throwing out here today in 2024. I'd be surprised. I asked one person, how do we go from brothers and sisters to N's and B's overnight?
The unfortunate part that's being left out is infrastructure and capitalism in America. If you made an anti-Semitic record, it would never see the light of day. If you talked about any group, the Greeks, the Italians, if you did anything disparaging to any of those groups as blatantly as we do to ourselves, they would say corporate responsibility, the record label would drop you, they'd put you down. The minute you do black on black, it's free speech. I lived through the turn of the 60s into the 70s. I saw it go from slacks, high water pants, shark skin, to bell bottoms. So we had the Black Panthers on one side, and we also had the pimp on the other side. So there was always this dichotomous energy in our neighborhood. So while the Black Panther rhetoric is happening, the pimp styling is what the main fashion is. So the loud colors, the lifts and the high waters or whatever, the bell bottoms and all of that, that was quote unquote pimp wear for the most part. So even terms like pimp become a term of endearment simultaneously with my nigga and all of that. So when you start to look at what's happening in the culture and what's being defined as cool, there's a certain level of the underculture or the subculture that is defining it. And I think the biggest problem I've always had is when we say they and those people. We always play to the lower end of ourselves because we don't believe in the higher end.
In our value system. And we accept that kind of thinking. So that's the really crazy part. So as we get ready to look at what African-centered education was all about, now we jump into 1997. I think this is critical. In fact, this is researchable. You can go look it up. At our height, when we had it really going on, 1997, Detroit News came out, and we had two really good papers back then. Now we got one hybrid of both. But Detroit News came out with an article, front page headlines: Detroit test scores soar. Our children were achieving these standardized tests, and I'm not glorifying standardized tests, okay? Don't get me wrong. You can still be stupid even though you pass these tests. You can still be a fool. Educated fool, my mom used to say. But anyway, long story, getting back to the point. That scared not only just Detroit and Michigan, that scared the nation. I mean, you got to understand, Africans and African descendants of the foundational Africans, I'm going to put that word out there so you can look that up real quick. The foundational Africans of this country were not made to be educated. Okay, that's right. We got to keep, so sometimes we get out of context and we don't see the water hoses and the dogs and the sticks in the nightclubs on a regular basis. And we still see them, but not on a regular basis. That this is the idea of keeping Africans, or keeping a whole race in its place. When you got, you lost arms and legs and head and maybe even your life, for even be able to make the A, let alone the B, C, D, and elemental P, you just make the A and you got it. There was just cause to have you severely punished and even terminated. So we go from that environment, and that's a toxic environment, the first 200 years, which is about 3-4 generations, to slowly being accepted in 54, Brown versus Board. I was born in 53, so that was just the year before Brown. So I'm one of the products of that child moving forward. I can go back and say that when I was in the 10th grade, I was so sick of the way they were teaching me. I just had to get out the system. I had to drop out because I just couldn't take it. So all dropouts wasn't because we did not, that we could not, and that we just wouldn't.